All right, today we're jumping into a really fascinating and, yeah, you could say pretty controversial scientific paper from back in 2002. It put forward this radical idea that humans and the cannabis plant might have this deep, symbiotic relationship, one that's actually shaped our biology for thousands of years. It's a huge claim, so let's unpack the evidence they presented.
Okay, so let's get right into it. At the absolute heart of this whole hypothesis is a biological puzzle, a question about the very strange and frankly unique wiring of our own brains.
You know, the whole story really kicks off with this one profound question. When scientists started looking closely at the human brain, they found something that just didn't add up from a normal evolutionary standpoint. It was so specific, so perfectly tailored to this one particular plant that it just screamed for an explanation. So, to get our heads around this puzzle, we need a super quick crash course in brain chemistry. Just picture the surface of your brain being covered in millions of tiny little locks. Scientists call these neuroreceptor sites. Now, these locks are really specific. They only open for certain chemical keys, and that's how different compounds can affect how our brain works.
Now, get this. This is the staggering fact that comes straight from the source paper. It's not just that we have these receptors for cannabinoids. The crazy part is that we have more of them than we do for all other neurochemicals combined. That's a huge anatomical anomaly that just makes you go, why? In fact, the paper points out that scientists have a word for how these cannabinoid receptors are arranged: ubiquitous. And that means exactly what it sounds like. They are literally everywhere, blanketing the entire surface of our brains. This incredible density, well, that's the mystery we're trying to solve.
So, if this massive number of receptors is the mystery, where do we even begin to look for clues? Well, the paper suggests the first one isn't in some high-tech lab, but buried deep in our nutritional history, in a food that's been almost completely forgotten.
So, according to the paper, before it was outlawed in the 20th century, the flour and oil from cannabis seeds, hemp, was a major source of protein for a huge part of the world. And we're not talking about some niche health food here. For a lot of cultures, this was a basic, fundamental part of their diet.
How fundamental are we talking? Well, if you were to rank the top 100 proteins for people to eat, hemp seed is number one. Not just good for us, the paper basically argues it might be the best for us.
So the really crucial part is why it's number one. The oil from hemp seed has the exact profile of essential fatty acids, or EFAs, that our bodies absolutely need to work but can't make themselves. And it's not just a close match, it's balanced to 0.1%. Nothing extra, nothing missing. It's like a perfect nutritional key for a very specific biological lock.
And we're not talking about just any nutrients. These EFAs are the literal building blocks for our two largest organs, our skin and, yep, our brain. So the very same brain that's covered in cannabinoid receptors is also built from the fatty acids that are perfected in the cannabis seed. That's our first big clue right there.
And that brings us to our second clue. This one takes us away from our diet and right back inside the brain. It's all about just how specialized those receptors really are.
Remember those locks all over the brain's surface? Well, the cannabinoid receptors are incredibly picky. They are substance-specific. That means only cannabinoid compounds fit. No other chemical, whether it's natural or man-made, can get in. From an evolutionary point of view, that points to a very special, very long-term relationship.
The paper argues that this is no recent accident. For our brains to develop such a huge and specific system for just one plant's compounds, that would take a deep co-evolutionary dance, one that could only happen over tens of thousands of years of us consistently eating it.
So, with these two big clues, a perfect food source and a uniquely adapted brain, we can start putting the pieces together, and we can finally reveal the central hypothesis of the paper. And believe me, it is a powerful one.
First, let's just be totally clear on what symbiosis means. It's not some weird fringe idea. It's a really common and powerful force in nature. It's where two different species evolve together to help each other out, becoming partners in survival.
We see this all the time with pandas, right? Their entire body, from their teeth to their digestive system, is perfectly adapted to eat almost nothing but bamboo. Without bamboo, they just can't make it.
And it's the same story with koalas. Their survival is completely tied to the eucalyptus plant. They've evolved side by side, creating this unbreakable biological bond. And this brings us right to the paper's core idea.
The hypothesis is that the relationship between humans and cannabis might be just as deep, just as ancient, and just as essential as what we see with these other iconic pairs in nature.
Now, if this hypothesis is true, or even just a little bit true, it forces us to ask some really profound and maybe even uncomfortable questions about our health and our habits in the world today.
The paper makes us consider a pretty stark possibility. By taking this perfectly balanced food out of our diets for the last century or so, could we have accidentally caused a huge wave of nutritional deficiencies that are now showing up as all these modern brain and immune system disorders?
And the parallels don't just stop at nutrition. The paper also points out that in the cannabis plant itself, those cannabinoids have a critical job to do. They act like a natural sunscreen, a shield that protects the plant from harmful UV radiation from the sun. And this leads to a speculative but really fascinating question that the paper raises. If these compounds protect the plant from radiation, is it possible that filling our brain's ubiquitous cannabinoid receptors could give us some kind of similar neuroprotective benefit?
And finally, the paper leaves us with this one last provocative thought, one that completely reframes a modern behavior. Could the chronic smoking of cannabis actually be, at its very root, a symptom of malnutrition? Is it just a subconscious, desperate attempt by our bodies to get back these essential compounds that used to be a normal part of our diet? It's a question that suggests we might not be chasing a high, but simply craving a food we were literally designed to eat.